press record. So let's follow up from last month's call. Last month, we identified some different time management strategies to maximize job development. We talked about prioritizing, scheduling, looking at your time and workload management. And we also talked about, as part of the scheduling and prioritizing, creating an employer log for job development activities. And I know that was something we were planning to review this month to see if anyone had an opportunity to create an employer log, and I'd be interested to hear how that went, what you included. Was it an opportunity to help manage time a little bit more effectively? So did anyone have a chance, or are you currently using an employer log for documenting your job development activities? You can use the chat box or unmute your mic if you'd like to talk. Okay, well, why don't we get started then looking at content for this call. We're going to review successes and challenges from this past month, get some advice, support from group members. We're also going to identify the elements of SMART goals and practice developing SMART goals. One of the asks, I guess, if you will, from on the blurb that Dawn sent out was to bring with you today your own SMART goal or your own goal, an individual that you're working with, a goal, so that we can practice developing goals that include SMART elements. Any questions? So what was a success this past month? What was something that you felt was particularly successful, you felt good about? Someone got a job or talked to an employer for the first time, or you were able to identify transportation for someone. Let's talk about what that success was. It doesn't have anything to do with goal planning, but something that we can talk about. And again, you can use the chat, you can unmute your mic, or you can certainly use the polling feature. So just type in what one success was this past month. Let's have a discussion about that success and really look at why that was successful, how you felt about that success. We'll give a few minutes. Okay, great. We have something in the chat. Great. Bridget is describing, she reached out to a local community college about doing a site analysis to carve out potential supported employment positions, and are set to schedule a campus tour to this end. Excellent. That sounds like a wonderful opportunity, that you are developing this relationship with the community college, which probably has a potential of multiple types of positions. Excellent. Alana writes that we have a client who keeps getting lost traveling to and from work, and she's been able to connect with ALTSA and find out that they may be able to support the client with this. Fantastic. So you were able to identify a resource that was really critical to this person's success. Great. So if one of you wanted to talk about what a little bit in more detail, what contributed to the success, how did you feel after the success? So let's think about what hooking up the person to the ALTSA, how that, what contributed to your success in doing that, or identifying a job carving opportunity with the community college, what contributed to the success? What skills did you use? What resources did you access? And how did you feel after the success? Again, you can type in the chat box, or we can have a discussion, unmute your mic. But I'd be really curious to hear how you felt, what you feel contributed to reaching out to the local community college and their positive response to this. Okay, well, maybe we could come back to that. And we'll give people another minute. I'll keep my eye on the chat box to see if anyone has written in there. So similar to a success this past month, there may have been obstacles or challenges that have presented themselves. What was an obstacle or a challenge this past month? And it could be related to your job development activities. Okay, we have a chat. Oh, okay, Alana, let's go back to the success. So you were connecting the person with ALTSA, and you made a wonderful connection with them at a recent benefits planning training, and you were able to reach out directly to them, which helped a lot. I think that really addresses how important networking is and using opportunities to interact with the business community or others in your community. I think that's fantastic. Rosa is talking about a challenge, lack of employers willing to hire DVR customers in your community. So let's get back to that. Let's look at Bridget's challenge. She met with a local contact at the Economic Alliance for our region and had a great connection. Okay, this sounds like this is more of a success. Consistent follow-up and being mindful of how the holidays and snow days were impacting their ability to respond. Felt great to hear that she was still thinking of the opportunity and had already reached out to her staff to identify opportunities first. That's fantastic. So this is going back to the community college contact and having that consistent follow-up and you know, really developing that relationship. It sounds like, Bridget, you were able to get the trust of the person, the contact person at the college. Fantastic. And Rosa, lack of employers willing to hire DVR customers. Anyone else have similar challenges that are presenting themselves in terms of not having employers? Okay, so think about that, the challenge of employers not interested or not willing or not hiring individuals from DVR. And then another challenge is Bridget is experiencing a challenge with her team, is the effect of minimum wage on job retention and willingness to employers to carve positions. Okay, so the minimum wage increase is certainly something that is presenting some concern that people have, and how willing employers are to carve out positions for individuals. It sounds like you might be referring to individuals fearing losing benefits because of the increase of minimum wage. I don't know if that's specifically what you're referring to, but I know that has been a concern for many people. So maybe we can schedule something in the later months about looking at the minimum wage and how that's currently affecting. Are others feeling that as well? Okay, so we have had people approaching SGA since the minimum wage increase, but also some people have lost their jobs. Okay, it sounds like people are approaching that substantial gainful work activity mark through Social Security. And I would imagine people are becoming fearful. Certainly that's something that we have found, and it certainly appears that people have these concerns around losing benefits, justifiably, concerns, particularly if they are in part-time positions and at the moment. Any other challenges that people have encountered? Let's talk a little bit about the lack of employers willing to hire DVR customers in Rosa's community. Is that something that others are seeing, that employer response has been minimal or hasn't been particularly engaging with services that you are all working within? Okay, let's see. Yes, Jessica, you've also had that. Yes, Lance, you find that too. So what are some strategies that you've used? What are some ways that you've been able to navigate this challenge? What's helped you to overcome this challenge? And what are some suggestions that others might have who may have experienced or are experiencing a similar challenge to that of Lance and others who have identified having that lack of employer connection? Lance definitely has to use a strengths-based approach, absolutely matching the participant's skills to the job description tasks. That's a great strategy. I think that having that discussion with the person, really using some of those tools that we've talked about throughout our last several calls, or even tools that you might use, identifying strengths, identifying skills, and really helping that person to sell themselves, to create that interview style or almost their own elevator pitch to sell their skills and sell their strengths to the employer. I'm curious to hear if employers are, what are they specifically saying? Are they specifically saying, we don't want to hire people through DVR, we've had bad experiences, or we are afraid to take that risk? What are the employers specifically saying? And that could go to anyone. I know Rosa posed the question, but I'm just curious if that's something that others would be willing to talk about. So then maybe we can think of some other ways in addition to Lance's ideas. Yes, Lance, his experience with employers is that they're always afraid of the liability if something happens. So that fear of taking the risk, if to them, I mean, they may feel that it's a risk because of that liability. Okay. So why don't we move on from challenges and start getting into, well, let's Rosa, she's not a developer, she's a voc rehab counselor. So what she hears is mainly from the job CRPs, and most are saying, the community rehab providers, and most are saying that they are afraid of the liability, or that they already have a large percentage of employees with disabilities. So employers are saying that they have already hired people with disabilities, and it sounds like they're suggesting that they don't want to hire anymore. Okay, so that's certainly a concern, and my initial thought is, I'm wondering if the community rehab providers are going in and automatically identifying that people they're working with have disabilities. I wonder if there's a way to coach some of the community rehab providers to help them to make these contacts with employers without possibly disclosing that information. And then if an accommodation is needed in order for the person with the disability to perform the job, then begin that negotiation process after that person has been offered the job. I don't know, and Bridget is following up with that. That's very true. She approaches a lot of employers who are open to supported employment, but already have several supported employees on staff. So it seems like employers, regardless of the person's strengths or skills, are not giving people an opportunity because of maybe a preconceived idea that they already have enough people who are through supported employment services and they don't want to hire anyone else. Okay. Bridget, how do you respond when that occurs? What are some of your strategies or responses? Because I think this is a really important issue that many job developers are facing. And it could be an opportunity to revisit your elevator speech about you and your service and what you provide, and revisiting how you're introducing your service to employers. Because leading with, this is a disability service or a service that works with people with disabilities or only people with disabilities, may in fact be closing some doors for folks, maybe limiting opportunities. So I would suggest revisiting some of those job development, approaching employers and introducing yourself to an employer in a way that is business-like and professional and aligned with the business community's needs and wants, which is qualified, dependable employees, and people who, as Lance mentioned, are matched to that particular job. Bridget's following up. Personally, I am working on reaching out to legislators to try and come up with legislation that would introduce a tax credit supplemental to the work opportunity tax credit to specifically incentivize hiring individuals receiving supported employment services. That's certainly a strategy as well. And Lance kind of follows that up with, he doesn't use the word disabilities in his introduction. And I would like to hear more about that. And maybe that could be helpful to Rosa and others who might be encountering this immediate response from employers. Leading with abilities is a great strategy, absolutely. So really leading with the abilities of not just the individuals that you're working with, but also the abilities and the strengths of your service, what you provide. You're providing really helping employers match employees to positions. You're providing an employer with candidates who you know because you've done some different assessments and you've done some other types of kind of readiness in terms of you know that the person is interested in that job, and you know the person has the skills and potential to perform that. So I think, yes, matching that person's strengths to the job is critical, but in addition to that, making sure you're describing that to employers and making sure that employers know that you are working with people to identify all of those important characteristics that they look for in job and their skills, in addition to working with and kind of assessing employers' needs. So making that match is something that you may want to really emphasize to employers. So maybe before we meet next time, we can really talk about how that helped. Bridget, if you were able to lead with abilities and kind of come up with an elevator pitch that may be less disabilities focused. I don't know what your pitch is currently. I'm just suggesting maybe another way of approaching employers. Great. But I think selling that job match, selling to the employer that You're there to get a sense of what their needs are and what they look for in candidates, so they can really begin to trust and they believe that you are there to really help them in the best way that you can. You're not just putting someone in a job, but we know that. I think it's important to convey that to the employers. Okay, well, let's move on to kind of following up on that. Interestingly enough, when we talk about goal planning, we really are sort of following the lead from some of the work that you've been doing with folks, such as engaging someone in that process of choosing employment, or an educational setting. We're really talking about employment now that matches values, interests, preferences, and skills. So you're helping that person identify a goal that really is consistent with what their work values are, consistent with what their interests are, what their preferences, and what they're good at. So when we think about employment and goal planning, we're really looking at all of those other aspects that are important to look at beforehand. In addition to looking at the person's values, interests, and skills, we also want to look at what the employer's needs are. We want to, again, go back to the work culture analysis that we've introduced in previous calls, but looking at what's the work culture of the job like? What are the job responsibilities? Helping really identify job goals based on all of those features and characteristics that the person is interested in pursuing. So again, we're kind of taking it from all of these assessments and work culture analysis, the career profile. We also want to really look at, are the goals related to selecting or choosing a job? Are they related to getting a job? And they might be related to maintaining a job. So an example of a job related to, or a job goal related to selecting employment might be the person is choosing to explore what's out there. So the person's goal might be related to exploration, or even the idea of choosing employment for the getting a goal or obtaining an employment goal that might be related to the person's short-term goal. So it might be really identifying what that goal is and when that person wants to achieve that goal. And it's more of a short-term type of position for that obtaining. And then finally, the maintaining or keeping employment piece really is looking at maintaining that job and keeping that job for a specific length of time, or creating a goal, helping the person develop a goal that really looks at advancing in that career or advancing in the job. So just keep in mind that the goal planning process really should relate to those areas. They could be a choosing or selecting, obtaining or getting, or maintaining or keeping employment positions. So some elements of a good career goal: they should be achievable. They should also be somewhat flexible. So the person should feel confident and comfortable in revising the goal if necessary. They should also be stated in positive terms. So we don't want to identify what the person can't do. We really want to focus on what the person will do, not what they will not do. An example of a SMART goal is, I intend to obtain a full-time job as a receptionist in a medical office by September 2020. We're going to break down all of those elements of a SMART goal, and hopefully we'll have a chance to practice using some of the goals that you kind of brought with you today. But again, they should be measurable, very specific, and somewhat challenging. So we'll talk a little bit about what that means, but why don't we move on to, oops, we'll walk through each of these areas. So SMART goals include, it's an acronym for specific, measurable, attainable, or sometimes it's referred to as achievable, realistic, and timely or time-bound. So when we talk about specific, we really are looking at making sure the goal is pretty straightforward and emphasizes what the person wants to happen, and really helping the person to consider the who, what, when, where, why, and how in developing the goal. So certainly the person, but what is the goal? So really breaking it down to very specific features. And we're gonna do some looking at goals a little bit further to see if they include that level of specificity and how we might change those to make them more specific. Measurable, so we need to measure progress. So the person would need to measure the progress so that they can see changes over time. So you might want to include some sort of descriptor or some sort of measurement that might be helpful. They should also be attainable. So some effort, they should require some effort, certainly, and as we mentioned before, they should be somewhat challenging, but also reachable. So it should be something that you're taking into consideration. Does the person have the resources needed for this particular goal? Is it reachable for the person? Realistic is not easy. It's not really we're not translating it to something that's an easy goal, but it is something that's doable. So realistic, sometimes in the acronym, people use the R for relevant. So making sure it's realistic so that it's doable, but also if you look at the relevancy of it and making sure that it's consistent with the person's ultimate life goals and valued social role that that person wants to achieve. Time bound or timely, there's a real clear target for the person to work towards. So, and it's a realistic deadline. So it's not something that kind of just floats out there for years and years or months and months. It is this really realistic and targeted time frame, so that I don't know about any of you, but I've set goals before, and of course the classic, I want to lose weight or exercise more, and when there's no time frame, you know, by May of this year, I'm going to increase my exercising by, you know, 50% or however it is. But when you think about making it a time-bound goal versus something that's just floating out there, it does make it a little more real and a little more important when you put that time frame. So here's a brief video I thought would be interesting to watch, really illustrating developing SMART goals. And it's something that when Dawn sends out the PowerPoint presentation, you'll have, and you can look at it. Again, it's very brief, but I think it does a nice job looking at SMART goals. And it could even be helpful when you're working with individuals and you're describing the goal planning process and what SMART goals are. It could be kind of a fun, engaging way to meet with the person. So I'm going to play this, but I think I have to kind of stop the share and make sure that you're able to see it. Let's see. Hang on one moment. And please, if it's not showing or you can't hear it, let me know and I will, okay. Just maybe in the chat box, someone could let me know if they're able to hear and see this. Just a real quick yes or no. Okay, I'll turn up the volume. Okay. All right, hang 1 second. It may not be working correctly. I'm seeing a lot of chats. Okay, you know, it may be something I'll send out, and it could be maybe right now it's probably best to wait a minute. Now I've lost my place with my, okay. I'm going to probably not show it at the moment just for time purposes, but you'll have it in the presentation and certainly able to use, apologize about that. Sometimes it's a hit or miss. Okay. Let me just, oops. Okay. But again, you'll have it. It'll be a nice resource for you to have. Are you able to see the PowerPoint? Just a quick. So I'm back on the presentation and there's a poll. Are you all able to see that? Maybe just like a quick little, yes, I apologize, but when you switch over to different screens, sometimes it's hard to tell what you're able to see. So this quick poll is asking, do you use SMART goal documentation? Okay, yep. You can use the chat box as well. Others currently using it or not using it, you can just, it's no answer is right or wrong, just trying to get a gauge of who might be familiar with this type of documentation. So, oh, let's see. One person in the chat. Okay, so yes, people are using it and kind of thinking back of what we just talked about, the 5 areas of SMART goal planning. How can the SMART framework improve your work if you're not currently using it? Or how has it improved your work if you are using it? How has using this framework in your rehab plan, goal plan, development improved or potentially could improve your work? Mandy, I think it's what my goals, I think it's what my goals are with my clients, but I have not used them. Okay, so it sounds like your goals probably match a lot of those criteria and elements, but maybe you're not terming them. There's no label called SMART goals. Using SMART goals creates satisfaction for clients and their guardians because they can clearly see how employment consultants are accountable to the goals. So yes, they can see the accountability for everyone because there are interventions and objectives that specifically identify certain people or certain tasks that will be carried out. When we discuss the T of SMART with participants, we outline a timeline of tasks, milestones for them to complete so that they can see the plan laid out in front of them. Absolutely, so that you're helping that person really see that this is achievable. This is something that is realistic and attainable, and marking out those time frames really does help that person see those milestones. And as they complete the milestone or the tasks associated with each objective, that they begin building that self-efficacy and belief that they may even be able to achieve more goals or different goals. Bridget, talking about the SMART goals, creating satisfaction for clients, can you talk a little bit, you can unmute your mic if you have access to the microphone, about what that means, or kind of describe. Okay, Mike's shy. I don't blame you. I am too. No, I'm just kidding. But if you want to chat, that'd be helpful too, just to let us see maybe some examples of times or opportunities that you were able to really hear from clients that you're working with, that satisfaction, or ways that you sensed that satisfaction from people. But while we're waiting for you to type that in, accountability to the goals by using measurable and time-bound qualities, absolutely. So those goals are accountable. People, whether it's you, the person, other people in the person's life, other providers or other resources, but that accountability is there and it's laid out in the goal plan. So my colleagues in another capacity did some work around SMART goal activities, and I adapted some of these from them. But we're going to look at a series of goals or interventions, because remember, we're kind of focusing just on this very brief webinar call today on the actual SMART goals. But there are, you know, when you're writing objectives or interventions, we want to make those SMART as well. So when you're writing different objectives, or with the person writing the objectives, you want to make sure that they include the elements of SMART, the SMART framework as well. So let's look at these, and just in the chat box, just write yes or no. I'm going to ask, do these goals or interventions follow the SMART framework? Are they rehabilitation oriented? The first question is probably most important for us. If not, what changes need to be made? So let's go and see. I will start to look for jobs in the community by August 1st, 2020. Is that SMART? Does that include all of the SMART elements? Does it follow the SMART framework? Yes or no? You can use your mic or just type in the chat. And if it does not, what changes need to be made to make it a SMART framework? So is it specific? Let's look at the definition of specific. Is it straightforward and emphasizes what you want to happen? Yeah, I guess it's emphasizing what the person wants to have happen. Does it really consider those, the who and the what and the when and the where? I guess where would be the community, what would be jobs. But is it specific? I would say there are ways to make this more specific. I will start to look for jobs in the community by 8/1/2020. So what are some ways that this could be a more specific goal? What could the person include? it seems a bit vague to me. A clearer or more specific, straightforward goal might be something along the lines of, I will obtain a job as a, and identify what that A might be, as a mechanic, as a butcher, as a web designer in the Seattle area or in private mental health positions or in the private mental health sector by 8/1/2020. So it does have the time, it is timely and time bound, that's for sure. But I think that could be more specific. Let's look at some others. So this might be related more to an intervention or an objective, to a choosing goal. I will complete a self-directed search assessment by 2/20/2020. Does this objective kind of meet those SMART elements or SMART goal planning or objective planning framework? Is it specific? Yeah, it is. The person's telling us exactly what tool they're going to complete. It seems reasonable that the person would be able to complete this. There may be some other elements in the plan that include what you as providers will be doing. So there may be other areas that identify what resources you might be helping the person with or what supports you would be providing. And it's time bound. How about this? In the chat, identify yes or no if this is a SMART framework. I will obtain a job as a sports correspondent at an online news station by September 2020. Yes or no? Hello, anybody in the chat want to just type in whether they think this is a yes or a no? I think this is I think this meets the criteria of a SMART goal. I think it identifies what the job is, a sports correspondent, where at an online news station, and is certainly time bound, and assuming that the person has the credentials, it's achievable or attainable, and it's realistic. There are jobs for sports correspondents, and you know, maybe there aren't as many newspapers around, but the fact that the person is interested in doing this online may help make that even a more realistic goal. And by September 2020, we're putting that timely or time-bound end to it.
Hi, Joni, this is Jessica.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Just barely, if you could.
Oh,
yeah.
I don't know how to turn up the volume. I was just wanting to let you know there is responses in the chat, so I'm not sure if you're seeing them.
Oh my gosh, I'm not. Something seems off. I apologize. I don't see anything in the chat. Would you mind reading those? My chat is not coming up for some reason. Would someone read what's in the chat? I am so sorry. Thank you for bringing that to my attention.
Yeah, no, everyone agreed that that was a SMART goal.
Okay, thank you. How about this one? I will complete an outpatient program. That's so odd. Again, I can't see the chat. I'm assuming people are typing in no, that is not a SMART goal. Why is that not a SMART goal? Oh, now, okay, it's back. So, yep, Lance, there's no when's, not very specific, where, absolutely. Now I'm seeing them all. Thank you for pointing that out. I don't know why my chat box was hidden for a little bit. Yep, there's no target date. Um, let's just go to the one prior. Yep, that was pretty specific. And this one, it looks like people, okay. How about I will enroll as a full-time college student by 9/1/2020. Where, yep, this was very close, right? The person almost got it, but having that where would be, make it even more specific and more achievable, because now you're knowing what what program you're applying to, what college you're applying to. You're able to identify the specific criteria for that particular college. So yep, absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. Just a few more words about goal plans. We really want to make certain that this is something that is kind of this living document, this living plan, not to be filed away, but used. And maybe think of ways that this could be made very visible during your meetings with people, or you know, how can this be something that's really front and center of your meeting and of your time that you're spending with people. Reviewing and updating, revising it with the job seeker on a regular basis. So if the person no longer has transportation to get to a certain employer or a certain area of town where their original goal kind of directed them to, it would be time to revise and update, making sure that you're considering input from others, always at the job seeker's request. So are there family members? Are there others in the person's life who they would want to be invited to be part of the goal planning process? And you can certainly talk to people if they do have loved ones in their life, or other providers, or other people who support them. You can really review the pros and cons, some of the advantages and disadvantages of that, to help that person make a really informed choice. But certainly it is the person's decision, and who they want to invite should be front and forth. You know, if that person believes that someone has a something relevant to contribute, then that could be something that you as a provider can help the person reach out to that individual with consent, of course, and invite those folks to the goal planning process. And that could be by phone or at the person's house, whatever that might be, the individual served house. But yes, it really is something that kind of should live on. So let's look at some of the goal plans that you may have brought with you today. And let's go back to, I'm gonna slide back, so just kind of try and do it a little bit slowly, so not to dizzy anyone, but I'm going to go back to that framework of the SMART goals to look at some of the goals that maybe you want to write in the chat box, or that you've brought with you. They can be vague, they can be unrefined at this point, and we can help walk through one or two to make them a SMART goal. So if you want to unmute or type in the chat box, whatever works best for you. But let's spend a few minutes really looking at a goal that either you or a person that you're working with has, that you want to come away from this call with an actual SMART goal that matches or meets these elements. Anyone have one that they want to? Again, it can be vague, it could be really unrefined at this point, and we as a group can help you define it in a way that meets these SMART goal planning criteria. We'll give a minute or two for people to write in the chat, or unmute your mic if you wanted to just verbally talk about it. We can walk through it that way as well. Again, not seeing the chat. Is there a chat? Can someone see it and maybe read what it might be? I have got to talk to my IT person because my chat is not coming up at times. Oops. Is there anything in the chat? Let's see, somehow, what might be the problem? Oops. I'm so sorry. I don't know why I'm not seeing it. Can someone let me know if there is something in the chat, and you can just read it off? Okay, well, we'll move on, but it would be nice to have one or two examples to leave the call with. Let me just do one more thing to see if I can get to it. Lance, are you able to see anything in the chat box? Just type out, is there anything in there?
Can you hear me, Jody?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, yeah, there's nothing in the chat box.
Okay, that's good. So if something does pop up, would you mind just
Certainly.
describing what it is?
Okay.
We'll give some people another minute or two. Okay, well, let's move on to this is just a very generic example. I'm sure your goal plans probably look very different and are maybe need to be written a certain way for your regulations and your Medicaid and insurance regulations, but this is something that just I thought could be kind of a useful for us to look at. But it's the overall employment goal is to get a job as a rehab practitioner at a community agency by 1/30/2021. And then it kind of lists specifically what resources or skills does the person need to accomplish this goal. In other words, what are those objectives the person would need to apply for jobs at agencies in his or her area, in their area? What does the skill or resource look like? They need to have an updated resume. They need to have a list of potential employers. They need to have references. They need to have scheduled interviews. And then kind of looking at how will they get the resource or skill that they need. So it's sort of written in a way that to me is a little bit more user-friendly. And when we start using terms like objectives and interventions, I know that your funders probably need to use those, but when we are working with people, maybe just identifying what are those resources that I need? What are those skills that I need? Kind of lays out developing a resume that reflects the education, and on for the references, asking 3 people, and then the target date is there to the right. So you can see the target date lines up nicely with the overall rehab goal date of 1/30/2021. So again, this probably isn't what your goal plans look like, but if it could help you visualize what to include or how to really refer to the objectives and the interventions. That interventions piece is really looking at how will I get the resource or skill that I need. And a lot of this language is person first. Understandably, in your positions, you may need to identify what the practitioner or provider's role is in terms of reimbursement. But I think this is where we end and summarize for the next call. I apologize for the technical difficulties with the chat. I don't know what happened. I'll resolve that for next time. If we could commit maybe to write a SMART goal with someone, with two people. So if you're working with two individuals, you and that person can develop a SMART goal together using the elements that we reviewed, and come back next month and we'll talk further about that and the process and how it went. That would be really great. So I thank everyone. If you have any questions or comments, there's about a minute if you wanted to ask those. I'll send this out and you'll have that brief 3-minute video about SMART goal planning that I think could be really useful. It's kind of a fun way that they do it. So thank you, and I appreciate everyone's time. Please send feedback to Dawn, or any feedback evaluative that could be helpful for me in planning future calls. That would be wonderful. Again, I thank you and hope everyone is sidestepping the flu these days. So enjoy. Talk to you soon.
Thank you, Jody. Have a good day.
Yeah. You too. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.